Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Don Lemon Show. It is a crucial time for America's standing in the world. Ukraine, Israel, the hostages. There is one person in the middle of everything.
We have been clear on our strong support for Israel. Israel is an ally, it's a partner, it's a democracy. Our view is that this operation cannot move forward given the tense and difficult humanitarian situation on the ground. Every morning I wake up hoping that I will see that a deal has been struck.
Linda Thomas-Greenfield is America's ambassador to the United Nations. For 40 years, she's had a distinguished career at the highest levels of American diplomacy. Her every move is watched around the world. But it's what she didn't do at the UN in recent days that could change the course of the war between Israel and Hamas. Madam Ambassador, thank you so much for joining us.
I'm delighted to be here with you.
I really appreciate it. So we're going to talk about a lot, but I want to start with what's at top of mind here, and that is Israel and a ceasefire. Just a few days ago, at UN Security Council vote, the U.S. abstained on a resolution demanding a ceasefire in Gaza. Why did you abstain?
We have always said we support a ceasefire connected to the release of the hostages and that would provide for ramped up humanitarian assistance to meet the dire needs of the Palestinian people. So that resolution provided for that, but we felt we could not vote for the resolution. We abstained because there was no condemnation of Hamas, and we have pushed strongly for that in the council. Most council members in their public statements have condemned Hamas, but we have not been able to get that in a resolution, and we felt without that in the resolution, we could not vote for it.
But many are looking at this as a break from decades of foreign policy on Israel. So do you agree with that? Is it a break from foreign policy?
No, it's not a break from foreign policy. The president has been clear throughout this conflict that we support a ceasefire that's connected to the release of the hostages. Hamas is holding more than 130 Israeli citizens who were taken in a horrific attack on October 7th. So we have to continue to push for that. But at the same time, we have also been very clear in our conversations with the Israelis that they have to respect and abide by international humanitarian law to protect civilians and to allow for humanitarian assistance to go in. So this was not a change in policy at all. And as you know, Don, we had our own resolution on the table a week before that laid out all of this in our resolution, which the Russia and China vetoed.
So why is it so hard then to punish Hamas?
You know, I can't answer that question. I ask that question regularly in the council. Why can't we call out Hamas? The Israelis ask that question regularly. My suspicion is there's tremendous fear on the part of the Palestinians who are being held hostage in a sense by Hamas, who are hiding behind civilians and civilian infrastructure. And I know that as we look at the protests on the streets in the Arab world, there's a sense that the countries in the region fear those protests and don't want to provide any fuel to those protests.
I'm wondering if it's, people were saying that, as I said, many said that it was sort of, a break from foreign policy as it relates to Israel. And I'm just wondering about public sentiment, Madam Ambassador, because according to a Gallup poll, a new Gallup poll just days ago released, saying that for the first time since the war started, the majority of Americans disapproved of Israel's action in Gaza, down from 50% approval in November to 36% now at the end of March. Does public sentiment play a role in the decision to abstain or in anything that you're doing?
You know, I can't comment on polls, but no, I mean, we look at the situation on the ground. We communicate with our partners. We have intense discussions in the Security Council, and we make our decisions based on the policies that we see make sense to us at that time. But definitely public views are heard and they are listened to. I talked to Palestinian Americans. I talk to Jewish Americans on a regular basis. I'm engaged with university students, with others who are expressing strong views on both sides.
Yeah. I'm wondering about a deal, because this is a quote from you. You said, following the vote, you said, "We are getting closer to a deal for an immediate ceasefire with the release of all hostages, but we're not there yet." So where are we on a final deal?
You know, they're still talking. The negotiations were intense over the past couple of weeks, and we're still optimistic that they will get to a deal. But getting to these kinds of negotiated deals are really hard. It requires a lot of intense discussions with the Israelis. The Qataris and the Egyptians are engaged in this, and we know that there will not be a permanent or cessation of these hostilities without the hostages being released. And so those discussions are really, really important.
And so there's no timeline at the moment for...
I think the timeline is urgency. We all want to see this happen yesterday. Every morning I wake up hoping that I will see that a deal has been struck.
Well, I'm just wondering if there's any imminent end to this hostage crisis, because as you mentioned, there's what, 150 Israeli citizens and Americans on top of that. Is there any hope, especially in the season that we're in now?
It's about 130 is the number I've heard,
130.
and we can't ever lose hope.
Yeah.
So we are hopeful. I'm talking with families on a regular basis. They have not given up hope. So as long as they have hope, we have to continue to do everything we can to ensure that these hostages are released.
I want to talk to you about, after the abstention, the Israeli delegation canceled a visit with President Biden to discuss the war and then rescheduled it. I'm just wondering, is that an added layer of complication on top of an already complicated situation that it's going to hurt?
It is a complicated situation, and thankfully those that visit is back in discussions. We've not set a firm date yet, but we are discussing with the Israelis to move forward on that visit.
So the U.S.-Israeli relations have deteriorated. There's this growing tension between Prime Minister Netanyahu and also President Biden. How would you define the U.S. relations now with Israel?
Look, we have been clear on our strong support for Israel. Israel is an ally, it's a partner, it's a democracy. And as a friend, sometimes we disagree with each other, but friendships can always overcome those types of disagreement. So I think our relationship continues to be strong, but it doesn't mean that there are not tensions.
So let's talk about Rafah, right? Because there's another, as we said, added level of difficulty here. That Israeli delegation is set to discuss this planned military operation in Rafah, which is a southern city in Gaza, where more than 1 million Palestinians are taking shelter. The U.S. is hoping to limit civilian casualties there. President Biden called attacking Rafah a red line. The Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, called it a mistake. Do you expect this operation to move forward?
I can't speak for the Israelis, but our view is that this operation cannot move forward given the tense and difficult humanitarian situation on the ground. This is why we want to have discussions with the Israelis to help them figure out how they address the needs of 1.5 million people who are sitting in Rafah, and how they mitigate any additional civilian deaths in their attempts to go after Hamas. But let me be clear, we support Israel's right to go after Hamas. Hamas is a terrorist organization that not only attacked Israel on October 7th, but they've been clear that they will do another attack as soon as possible. So Israel's defense, Israel's efforts to destroy Hamas's military infrastructure is something that we support.
You said you can't speak for the Israelis, but let's talk about what U.S. officials have said. Such an attack would cause a humanitarian disaster. The Vice President Kamala Harris has said that there would be, quote, consequences for the Israeli government if they move forward with this. What kind of consequences?
I can't project what those consequences will be, but I think our position has been clear on that.
Yeah. You're walking a tightrope here.
I am walking.
You're walking a tightrope here.
I'm on the front lines.
You are the front lines, and I see you. You know, I watch you at the UN. I get the feed, and it's like, my gosh, she's in it every single day. Let me tell you why I believe that. Israel and its supporters are arguing that this ceasefire, saying that this is Hamas's fault. Hamas started all of this when they slaughtered some 1,200 people on October 7th.
And we agree with that.
And they still have not returned the hostages.
And they have not returned the hostages.
On the other hand, we were talking about public sentiment, though. There's a significant number of UN nations, and this is UN nations, not just the American public, as well as a growing body of Americans who feel that the U.S. is aiding and abetting mass civilian deaths in Gaza. How do you, as ambassador, bridge that gap between these two sentiments?
Look, the U.S. is a strong supporter of human rights, humanitarian support. We are the leader in this area. Our values on this issue are very, very clear. And we have consistently raised our concerns with the Israelis about the large numbers of civilian deaths that have been caused by their response. And we will keep pushing them on this issue. This is not something the U.S. supports. It's something that we want to stop. And in the meantime, we're doing everything we can on the ground. Unlike any of those other member countries that you're talking about, we're on the ground trying to find a diplomatic path forward to end this, and we're on the ground providing humanitarian assistance. And I commend Egypt and Qatar, who have been working closely with us to find a path forward.
Does it get to you when you? Because I said you're on a tightrope, and you're right.
It does get to me. It does get to me. I don't want to see people suffer anywhere. I have, as I said, I've met with Jewish families. I met with a woman who was a hostage and was released. I've met with children who have parents who are still there, who have brothers and sisters. I feel their pain. Mm-hmm. On the other side of it, I have also met with Palestinians who have also experienced extraordinary pain, losing their homes and their families, and really not sure what lies in the future for them. And so I feel it from both sides, and it's a tremendous burden. It's a tremendous obligation for me to do everything I can to stop the misery. One
more question on this, because speaking of tremendous burdens, I want to move on and talk about Sudan because I know it's important to you. But one more question on Israel. There's a UN official, Francesca Albanese, a special rapporteur on the occupied Palestinian territories, just a few days ago, Madam Ambassador, said that there is, quote, reasonable grounds to believe that Israel has met the threshold for genocide.
I find that there are reasonable grounds to believe that the threshold indicating the commission of the crime of genocide against Palestinians as a group in Gaza has been met. Specifically, Israel has committed 3 acts of genocide with the requisite intent, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part, and imposing measures intended to prevent birth within the group.
What is your response to that?
I think that we are working. We don't agree with that. Let me be clear. But there is a case before the ICJ. We don't want to get ahead of that case. And in the meantime, we're continuing to press the Israelis to take into account civilian casualties as they carry out their efforts to end Hamas's carnage, their threats to the existence of the Israeli people.
Mm-hmm. ICJ, explain to our viewers what
the International Court of Justice.
Court of Justice. And there's a case in front of you. You don't want to get ahead of that.
I do not want to get ahead of that.
Let's talk about Sudan, because I know you wrote about it in the New York Times. Again, this is important to you. It's a different unfolding humanitarian crisis. It's an ongoing civil war there, resulted in famine for as many as as much as half the population there. Give us a rundown on just how dire this situation is and how we got here in the first place.
You know, this has been going on for quite some time, for over a year. So it started even before this current situation in Gaza. But what has been so devastating for me, and I think for the people of Sudan, it's 20 years ago we were in the same place where we declared a genocide, Colin Powell, in Darfur. And right now we're going through that again. I visited Chad on the border with Sudan in 2004. I went back last year and it hadn't changed. I saw people coming across the border. I quote a young woman who told me she'd lost her ambition. Most of the young women coming across the border have experienced violence and rape. And this is about a war between two generals who are fighting for their own ambitions. They don't care about the people of Sudan. And the numbers of deaths, the carnage that's taking place there is just forgotten by the whole world. And while I am dealing with sort of a running list of crises every single day, no crisis is more important than the other. And so I felt it was important for me to raise the profile of Sudan in spite of everything else that we are dealing with across the world. That, you know, we can't forget the people of Sudan.
I just want to you said in the op-ed last September when I visited the makeshift hospital in Andra Ched, where young Sudanese refugees were being treated for acute malnutrition, that was all I heard was an eerie silence. You were expecting to hear the wails and cries of babies and children, but none of that.
None of that.
It was eerie silence.
They were just laying there, not moving, no light in their eyes, their mothers holding them, not even crying. It was really, really, really painful to say the least.
So you're the ambassador to the most powerful nation on earth. How do you alleviate the crisis there? What else, how do you get what is needed to Sudan and help as a UN ambassador?
Well, there are three things that I have in my toolkit that I can do. I can raise the alarm, which I'm doing. Two, we can raise this in the Security Council, and which we did 2 weeks ago. We had a resolution that also called for a ceasefire. And then three, engage with the Sudanese public, to engage with ordinary citizens, to let them know that they have not been forgotten. I spoke with a non-governmental organization head earlier this week, and he described the helplessness of humanitarian agencies, and I said to him, helplessness combined with hopelessness is a dangerous combination, and people are feeling hopeless in Sudan, and we have to help the humanitarian agencies address their needs.
You $47 million in aid for Sudan as of March 21st, 2024. That's on top of the $968 million last year. Money will help. I have to ask you this, though, because why does a conflict like Sudan basically get zero attention in comparison to Gaza and Ukraine, which we're going to talk about?
Well, I'd like to ask the press that. I think we need to encourage our media to pay attention to all humanitarian situations. So when I went to Sudan, I carried three press media operations with me so that they could actually report on this, and they did. But I shouldn't have to always do that. There should be more active attention by the international press to what is happening everywhere in the world. We can't parcel out our attention to one crisis and forget others.
Let's talk about Ukraine now. I'm wondering because, listen, obviously Ukraine needs the support, right? But then there's also folks who say we're giving too much money. How much more money can we give to Ukraine? I'm just wondering how you balance the importance of Ukraine for NATO security with the economics of what seems like an endless funding for the war effort.
This is a war between an aggressive tyrant who took an unprovoked attack on his neighbor. And Ukraine is on the front lines of fighting for democracy. It's on the front lines of fighting against autocracy. We're not putting American troops on the ground because Putin's, it's clear, his intentions, his ambitions won't end with Ukraine if he succeeds with Ukraine. And every country in that region stands to be threatened by Putin. Yeah. So we have to stand with Ukraine. The president has made clear that we have to stand with Ukraine. And the money that we're putting to help Ukraine defend itself is also about defending us and defending the rest of the world against a tyrant, an authoritarian whose ambitions are unlimited.
I'm so grateful that you came here to talk to us about all of this, but if we can end on a personal note, my final question is, you and I are both from Louisiana.
Same hometown.
From the same hometown, Baton Rouge area, Baker and Zachary. You were raised as a child in the still segregated South. You entered Louisiana State University, you enrolled at LSU just a few years after it was desegregated. Today you are the United States ambassador to the UN. How does your upbringing in the Jim Crow South, how does that shape how you approach your work at the United Nations?
You know, I never forget where I came from.
Amen.
I know that the experience that I survived in Louisiana makes me into the person I am today. It gives me the fortitude, it gives me the strength, it gives me the compassion that I always talk about, came from my mother, the kindness that came from my mother. And my mother grew up in worse conditions than I grew up in. I always like to share with people that she got her high school diploma from the same school you got yours from, Baker High School, in 1989. And I couldn't go to Baker High School. I went to a segregated school in Zachary Northwestern High School. So all of that has really contributed to what I like to call my adversity muscle. So there's nothing that anyone puts in front of me that I don't think I can fight against. I don't always win, but I'm always prepared for the challenge. And I got that from growing up in the South and from the community and the family that surrounded me.
You call it gumbo diplomacy.
Yes, I do, because it's about, you know, gumbo is about a melange of everything that is put into a pot to make an amazing soup. And that soup is like bringing people together, people who are different, and having those people sit around the table. And you've sat at my table and had my gumbo.
I have.
And it's like a magnet for camaraderie and for friendship. So I call it gumbo diplomacy. I've done it all over the world.
And it works. I'm always surprised when people who even have come from different worldviews, different perspectives, when they can't sit around and just talk and hash things out without it becoming personal. We do that a lot in Louisiana.
We do.
And so it's just sort of foreign to me when I see people who aren't able to do that. The gumbo is good.
Well, thank you.
And
I look forward to sharing
so
some with you again.
Thank you, Madam Ambassador.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for watching The Don Lemon Show. Make sure you click on the image in the top right to subscribe to my channel and the thumbnail in the bottom right to watch more content from my show. And I'll see you next time.